When a lost dog is gently coaxed by the shelter's team to approach an unfamiliar lady, his indifferent response deeply saddens her. Yet, when the dog finally recognizes the lady, tears fill his eyes, and everyone watching starts to tear up too. In the dim light of the shelter, Katrina caught sight of a skinny, large dog with deeply familiar blue eyes that immediately drew her in. It felt like time stood still. Welcome to Wonderbot Animals. Could this really be Lord, the dog she once knew, standing there? The dog's fur was patchy, his frame skinny, with ribs visible, and his skin showed sores where fur had dropped off. If this was indeed Lord, he looked nothing like he once did. Katrina looked for any sign of recognition in those deep blue eyes, but found none. Lord's look was distant, his eyes showing no sign of remembering. Katrina felt her hope fading. "He's going to need some time to get better," the vet at the shelter explained. "Right now, he's heavily sedated. This dog has seen a lot of hardship." The happiness Katrina felt was now mixed with sharp doubt. Could this really be her Lord, the dog she once held as a small puppy, the friend who had been by her side day and night? She felt tears coming. It wasn't just the thought that this could be her dear Lord. It was the fear that their special connection might have disappeared for good. Her hand shook as she reached out to the dog. She silently begged for him to recognize her. In that moment, the long years of searching, of clinging to hope, felt incredibly heavy on her. Was this reunion the end of her long search, or just another heartbreaking moment in the difficult journey destiny had in store for them? 5 years earlier, a young Katrina beamed as she cradled a small blue-eyed puppy in her arms. Lord, with his boundless energy and piercing gaze, quickly became more than a pet. He was her soulmate. Their days were filled with laughter, and their nights full of companionship and contented sighs. Each morning, Lord's excited barks were Katrina's alarm, and each night, his calm breathing was her lullaby. They were inseparable, a duo facing the world with unspoken understanding and love. Katrina had lost her husband a year earlier, and Lord's company was saving her life. But that harmony shattered on an autumn day in 2017. Katrina returned home to find her backyard eerily quiet. The gate was ajar, and Lord was gone. Panic gripped her heart as she called out his name, hoping for the familiar sound of his paws, but there was only silence. The following days turned into weeks, then months. Katrina's search grew more desperate. She posted flyers on every street corner and shared social media pleas across the internet, yet there was no sign of Lord. Her home felt hollow. Each corner echoed with the absence of her beloved companion, and her loneliness was more acute than ever before. As hope dwindled, Katrina was overwhelmed by a heartbreak that seemed endless. The void Lord left was more than just a missing presence. It was as if a part of her soul had been ripped away. Nights were the hardest. Each tick of the clock reminded her of the loss, and her heart ached for the return of her faithful friend. For Lord, the world had become a treacherous place. The streets were cruel to a dog used to the warmth of a human home. Each day was a battle for survival. He scavenged for scraps, dodged cars, and fled from hostile strays. The cold nights were especially cruel. Every night he curled up in deserted alleys, longing for the soft bed and gentle strokes he once knew. His once glossy coat turned dull and matted. His eyes, once bright with mischief, now mirrored the harshness of his reality. On the streets, people were once sources of affection, but now they either shooed him away or ignored his plight. The harshness of the world had not just marred his body, but had begun to dim the light in his soul. Salvation was quick and unexpected. A group of volunteers from a local animal shelter found him. Their gentle voices and careful touches were foreign yet comforting. Lord was weakened and weary, but allowed himself to be led into their vehicle. At the shelter, he was greeted with warm blankets and a bowl of food. Volunteers tended to his matted fur and soothed his wounded and scabbed skin. In their eyes, he saw not pity, but hope. His very soul was exhausted, but he had a glimmer of a chance at life again. Despite his frail body and weary gaze, there was a resilience in him, perhaps even a faint echo of the spirited dog he once was. Now, back at the shelter, the air was thick with unspoken questions and high hopes. Katrina had seen the dog's picture on the shelter's social media page and had been stunned by his similarity to the puppy she had lost 2 years earlier. She had rushed to the shelter, and now she stood before Lord, her emotions a maelstrom of joy and doubt. Lord's indifferent gaze was a stark contrast to the warm, loving looks he used to give her. There was no wagging tail, no joyful bark, no recognition in those once familiar blue eyes. It was as if he was looking through her, at a stranger, not the person who had shared her life and home. The volunteers watched with bated breath. Everyone hoped for a miraculous connection. But as minutes passed, they lost optimism. Katrina's mind raced. The ravages of street life could change a dog, but could it erase the bond they once shared? Her heart ached with the possibility that this dog might not be her beloved companion, and she left the shelter in tears. But Katrina wasn't ready to give up. If this dog was Lord, he had seen hardships beyond what she could conceive. He had every right to be scared and weary. Her only hope was understanding. So, with renewed conviction, the following day, she returned to the shelter. Now, she wasn't just looking at a dog that resembled Lord. She was looking at an old friend who had shared a part of her life, a friend who had left an indelible mark on her heart. This time, she carried with her a tangible piece of their shared past. As she approached Lord, her steps were tentative, but her spirit was buoyant. As soon as she reached Lord's kennel, she knelt down. Her eyes were level with his, and she whispered a phrase that had been their unique bond. "Good boy, Lord, good boy." Something shifted in Lord's demeanor. His ears perked up, his eyes flickered with a spark of recognition. It was as if the mists of time and hardship were clearing. Slowly, hesitantly, Lord moved closer to Katrina. He sniffed her hand, and then, with a soft whine that spoke volumes, he nuzzled into her palm. It was a gesture so characteristic of the Lord she knew, a gesture filled with trust and love. Tears streamed down Katrina's cheeks as she wrapped her arms around Lord. The dog she had mourned, searched for, and found again was finally in her arms. The shelter erupted into soft cheers and claps. The staff had just witnessed a reunion that they had only dared to hope for. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, a display of the unbreakable bond between a human and their pet. This love had weathered cruel storms and emerged stronger. Then, when she looked at Lord, tears were flowing from those piercing blue eyes too. At home, Lord slowly started to recognize his surroundings again. Every day was a little win, a step closer to getting back the life he once had. Sleeping in his own bed again, walking the same paths in the park, and most of all, having Katrina always there, helped him heal not just physically, but in deeper ways too. His tail started to wag more, his eyes got brighter, and you could hear his happy barks in the house again. Watching him get better, Katrina felt deeply thankful. Her house had been quiet and filled with missing him for so long, but now it was full of life and their rekindled connection. As time went on, Katrina often looked at Lord and thought about the incredible journey they'd been through together. Their story was about losing, enduring, and finally coming back together. It was about a connection that survived the toughest times, a relationship that was lost, but then found again, even stronger and more valuable than before. It told a story of love, strength, and how amazing life can be when you keep hoping. What a touching conclusion. Have you ever been separated from a pet? Imagine how it would feel to be reunited like this. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.